My little sister, Lucy, had initially wanted to come on the trip with me, but her job got in the way, and she couldn't make it. So I made the decision to head out on this adventure by myself. I found a nice little cabin on a popular rental site. It wasn't smack in the middle of nowhere, but it was secluded enough to give that feeling of escape. There were roads around that were decent enough for any car to pass through, and the town wasn't too far if I ever needed anything. Once I reached the place, I took all my bags and stuff from my car and dumped them in the main room of the cabin. The sun had already set and the world outside was pretty dark. I could barely make out what the exterior of the cabin looked like. Inside, the cabin was homely. Each room had cute little trinkets and decorations, making it feel warm and inviting. But the journey had left me exhausted, so I didn't bother unpacking. Instead, I flopped down on the sofa to relax. It must have been around 8 p.m. I'd just settled on the couch when I heard a loud shout. Someone was screaming for assistance. Given how secluded this place was, it struck me as odd that there'd be someone so close by, let alone someone in distress. Curious, I moved to peek out of the window in the main room. There, near my car, stood a man. He was holding what looked like a gun, maybe for hunting. He didn't look like he was in any pain or distress. So why was he shouting for help? My gut feeling told me something wasn't right. Deciding it was safer, I gently let the curtain fall back into place and took cover behind the wall. The soft crunch of leaves underfoot indicated he was moving closer to the cabin. Soon, he was right outside the front door. He paused for a bit, probably contemplating his next move. "Hey!" he yelled. "I really need your assistance. My buddy is hurt and we need to get him to a hospital." I debated answering him. However, his story seemed odd. Why did he have a weapon if his friend was hurt? The situation seemed too risky. I decided to stay silent. After a seemingly long pause, he shouted again, "I saw you when you arrived." He banged on the door with a force that jolted me. His voice was laced with anger. I wondered, why was he watching me earlier? Was he waiting for someone to show up at this cabin? As his heavy steps moved away from the cabin and closer to where I had parked, I held my breath. Only when I couldn't hear him anymore did I dare to look outside. He was gone, or at least not visible from where I was. Wanting to ensure I was safe, I went on a mini mission inside the cabin, checking every single window and door, making sure they were locked tight. Every window and door seemed good and secure, but there was just one that made me uneasy. In the kitchen, there was this little window. It looked like there used to be a latch there, but it was gone. You could see where it used to be because of some marks and little holes left behind. Why would someone take off a latch? It just felt strange and gave me an uneasy feeling. Not wanting to take any chances, I went out and fetched my toolbox from my car. Even though I was just renting the place and wasn't supposed to fix things, I felt it was important. I used some screws to fix the window shut. It felt better knowing it was locked tight. I thought the cabin's owners probably wouldn't even notice or mind. After that, I tried to relax. I watched some shows on my phone for a while and then headed to the bedroom to sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about what happened earlier and those noises outside. Then, I heard some weird sounds. It was like someone or something was bumping against the outside of the cabin. Then there was a scraping noise. I sat up, my heart racing. I just stared at the bedroom door, hoping it was just my imagination. In my head, I was imagining that guy from earlier. What if he was trying to get in? I sat there, quiet as a mouse, listening for any sound. I don't remember when, but eventually I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I thought of were the noises from the night before. I carefully checked around the cabin. And then I saw it. The little kitchen window I had screwed shut had marks on it, like someone had tried to open it. Outside, there were more marks and scratches, but only on that window. It looked like whoever tried to get in knew about the missing latch. Scared, I packed up my things super fast, called the person I rented from to let them know, and left. I didn't stick around to find out who it was or why. I just knew that I was super lucky I had been careful. If I hadn't checked that window, or if I had opened the door to that guy, things might have gone very differently for me. Back when I was 18 in the 90s, my Uncle Joe said I could use his summer house by the lake for a small vacation with some of my pals. The idea was to celebrate our spring break in style. Uncle Joe had this thing where he'd let close friends and our family use the house every now and then, almost like how people use Airbnb today. He'd promised me a long time ago that when I was old enough, I'd get my turn. Now, you've got to understand something about Uncle Joe. He was loaded. I mean, he wasn't just well off, he was really, really rich. He had a business partner, and together they owned some popular hangout spots in places like Vegas and LA. These places were super popular in their heyday. Despite his wealth and always being busy, Uncle Joe was a really laid-back guy. I didn't get to see him a lot, maybe just a handful of times every year. He was usually away in Vegas, but every time he visited, we had loads of fun. My family and we stayed in this place called Pleasant Prairie in Wisconsin. Uncle Joe's lake house was over in Antioch, Illinois. The good thing was that both places were pretty close to the state border, so the drive was pretty short. I'd say about 20 minutes or so. When I told my parents about the trip, they weren't too thrilled. At first, I just thought maybe they were worried because I was still young. But after what happened later on, I began to wonder if they knew something I didn't. After some discussions and me promising to be responsible, they finally agreed. They did have one condition, though. I could only invite 4 friends. That worked out for me since I was close to just 3 people. My closest buddy, Mike, decided to join me a day early. He wanted to help set up everything before the rest of our group got there. Uncle Joe's lake house wasn't some giant mansion or anything, but boy, was it fancy. It had a swimming pool, a relaxing hot tub, and inside there was this amazing game room in the basement. It had everything, pinball machines, a pool table, and more. It was just like how you'd imagine a rich person's vacation home to be. Mike and I reached the house around 5 in the evening. Uncle Joe had left the house key for me in the mailbox since he had stopped by a few days earlier. I was super excited to give Mike a tour of the place. He was absolutely stunned by how cool and luxurious everything looked. I was especially looking forward to showing him the game room in the basement. But when we got to the door, I noticed some new locks. I thought maybe Uncle Joe added them to keep his expensive stuff safe. Took us a while to find all the keys. After finally getting inside, I showed Mike around, but he noticed a peculiar door in a corner with a desk blocking it. Both of us, being curious teenagers, decided to check it out. Inside, we found a few random boxes and, to our surprise, 4 massive safes that looked like they were meant for guns. Mike was the first to break the silence. He asked, "Why would Uncle Joe need 4 big safes? He's not into hunting or anything, right?" I had the same questions swirling in my mind. Mike was eager to look through the boxes to find more clues, but I stopped him. Even though I was curious, it didn't feel right to snoop around Uncle Joe's private things. I felt like we had already seen too much. I ushered Mike out of the room and made sure to lock the door behind us. A couple of days after Mike and I discovered the peculiar room, he couldn't help but share the story with our other buddies, Jake and Sarah. They got so curious that they wouldn't stop talking about it. To make them stop guessing and imagining wild things, I decided to just show them the room. I thought that once they saw it, they'd calm down. But boy, was I wrong. They started making wild guesses about what might be inside the boxes and safes. "Do you think there are guns in there?" Jake wondered out loud. Sarah, with wide eyes, even suggested, "What if there are, bodies in the safes?" By nightfall, they'd woven a wild tale in which Uncle Joe was some sort of criminal mastermind or even a serial killer. I tried to defend him. "Guys, he's my uncle. He's not some sort of villain." But Sarah seemed genuinely scared. "What if we're in danger right now? Maybe there's proof in those boxes." Honestly, a part of me was curious too. So, to calm Sarah down and also satisfy my own curiosity, I decided to take a quick look inside one of those boxes. I opened one and found pretty normal stuff. some metal pipes, cigars, and a whole lot of letters. One letter caught my eye. It had my name on it. I went through more of them and found letters with the names of my parents, my little sister, my aunt, uncle, and cousins. Beside each name, there were details about schools, workplaces, and even chilling predictions about how each person would meet their end. My heart raced as I dug deeper into the box. There were threatening letters addressed to Uncle Joe. These letters demanded money, with clear threats about what would happen if he didn't pay up. One photo I found was especially terrifying. It was a snapshot of my older cousin walking outside her college, with a note describing awful things that would happen if the money wasn't sent by a certain date. Mike, Jake, and Sarah saw the horror on my face and gathered around me. They tried to reassure me, saying that most of these letters were old, so maybe the danger had passed. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that our family's safety was linked to Uncle Joe's decisions. I told my dad everything when I returned home, hoping he'd have answers, but he just said, "This is why we shouldn't snoop in other stuff," and left it at that. Years of worry continued until 2013, when I got the news that Uncle Joe had died, apparently by taking his own life. While part of me mourned, another part felt relieved. Was he really protecting our family all those years? I may never know. Last summer, I decided to take a trip to Northern California. So I started browsing Airbnb on my phone, and there were loads of great places available. But there was one area I had my heart set on, and to my surprise, there was a whole bunch of houses for rent right there on the same street. After going through a bunch of pictures and reviews, I finally picked the one that looked the best for me and made my reservation. Fast forward a month, and I landed at the airport. I went over to the car rental spot and got myself a car. With the address plugged into the GPS, I was on my way, and about an hour later I finally reached the house. It was pretty late by the time I got there, probably around 10:30 in the night. I was super tired and just wanted to go to sleep. But when I was getting out of my car, a woman from the house next to mine started to wave at me. She was right there in her driveway, all friendly and stuff. It seemed like she wanted to chat. Trying to avoid a long chat, I just smiled and waved back, quickly turning around to grab my bags from the car, but as I was doing that, I could feel her eyes on me. It was a bit strange, but I didn't think much of it. After taking all my things out of the car, I walked up to the front door of the house, and with every step, I could still feel that she was watching. I got inside, locked the door, and dropped my bags. I was both puzzled and tired, but decided I needed a shower. The house was pretty cool, but honestly, I didn't explore much of it because I was so sleepy. I hopped into the shower, and just as I was enjoying the warm water, the doorbell rang. But I wasn't expecting anyone, so I just ignored it, thinking maybe it's a mistake or something. I got out of the shower, dried off, and went straight to bed without even checking who was at the door earlier. The next day, after a good long sleep, I went around the city exploring and even went to this really famous eatery for dinner. By the time I was back at the house, it was around 7 in the evening. And guess what? That same woman from the night before was right there standing near my front door. But as soon as she saw me, she looked kind of scared and quickly ran back to her own house. I felt a bit uneasy about the whole thing. I quickly went inside my Airbnb and locked up. For the next hour or so, I kept peeking out of my windows just to see if she was around or doing something weird. I had no idea who she was or why she was acting this way, but it definitely made me feel uneasy. While I was chilling in the kitchen, browsing on my laptop, there was this loud bang on the back door. It kind of sounded like someone had thrown a stone or something. Curious, I glanced over, and just then, another stone hit the house. I got up and looked out the window, trying to spot who was causing the ruckus. It was dark outside, so I had to squint a little, and then I saw it. A shadowy figure standing a distance away. The figure bent down to pick up another stone and threw it, this time aiming straight for the window I was looking out from. I jumped back, startled, and thought, could it be that lady from next door? Taking a deep breath, I went and opened the back door, shouting out, asking whoever it was to leave. It was so dark I could barely make out the shape of the person, but they just stood still. Even when I warned them I'd call the cops, they didn't budge. Freaked out, I quickly closed the door. I wasn't sure about calling the police. Maybe it was just some lady who was a bit off. But then again, why was she throwing rocks at my place? I decided to just keep an eye out for a while and hoped she'd just go away. Eventually, things got quiet, and I felt a bit more relaxed. A couple of hours later, I thought it was safe enough to go to sleep. In the middle of the night, however, I was jolted awake. I wasn't sure why at first, but then I heard it, a really soft sound, almost like quiet steps, coming from the hallway right outside my room. Panic set in, and without really thinking, I rushed to the door and flung it open. There she was, the same lady standing barefoot, looking as surprised as I was. Without a word, she turned and ran out of my house. I chased after her, only to see her dash into the house next door. Locking my door, I knew it was time to involve the police. When the cops arrived and went to her house, there was no answer. The plot twist? That house? It was also an Airbnb, managed by the same person I had rented from, and apparently no one had booked it. This meant the lady knew the entry code and had been staying there without anyone's knowledge. The weirdest part was the cops couldn't find any clue about her identity or where she might have gone. That was it for me. I wasn't going to stick around and risk any more surprises. I packed up and took the first flight back home. The mystery of who she was or what she wanted remained unsolved. And to be honest, I didn't want to find out.